All right, everybody. So earlier in the stream, we covered a good story, good news in regards to Trump's legal cases, which involves him possibly going fully bankrupt in order to pay off the state of New York for some tax shit. However, we've got some bad news coming out of Georgia. Apparently, Trump's charges there have been dismissed. I think this shouldn't surprise most people considering he is Teflon Don, nothing ever sticks to him. So, I did kind of expect this. I'll admit, I was a little bit on the side of like, maybe he gets got for this stuff because it's so many things at once, but also he has never been got before. There's no reason to believe he will get got. But sure enough, charges dismissed in Georgia, it seems. Legal Eagle made a video about it, so let's check it out. Obviously, video down below in the description. Go watch it. Go sub. If you're not a Legal Eagle sub and you're not a regular viewer, what the fuck are you doing? It's Legal Eagle. What? Go sub. Regardless, link in the description, and let's check this out.
Charges dismissed. Trump finally wins in court. Well, not so fast. Yes, obviously I am not in my normal Legal Eagle office. I'm actually in Southern Utah because I'm participating in the off-road games. Then I'm definitely going to lose because I'm the only one.
Dude, I love whenever you watch I love whenever you watch a YouTuber who does some type of content and they're like, "Oh, by the way, I'm somewhere else right now because I'm doing insert crazy completely unrelated thing." Like, I see what your like hobby is, apparently you're very very into off-roading. And that's just the thing you're into, and you talk about it like once or twice, and this is my first time hearing about it. And it's that you got first place, apparently. I think he got first place. Yeah, no, this is him confirming he won. Holy shit.
One that doesn't have off-road experience, so that's fun. But this is a really interesting legal ruling from Judge Scott McAfee in Georgia in the Georgia election interference case. It's super interesting, it's super wonky from a legal perspective, and a lot of people are reporting on it wrong, so of course, we've got to cover it here on Legal Eagle. Yes, Judge Scott McAfee's had everyone on the edge of their seats wondering whether he would disqualify Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis and Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade from prosecuting Donald Trump because they had a romantic relationship while the case was being investigated. But instead of ruling on that motion, Judge McAfee dealt with some other
Jesus Christ. Oh my God. It's always something. It's always something, some non sequitur technical thing they can use to disregard the most heinous shit.
pending motions, including the defense's motion to quash some of the counts of the indictment. Judge McAfee threw out 6 counts in the 41-count indictment, including 3 charges against Donald Trump for his alleged efforts to persuade former Georgia House Speaker David Ralston and Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to violate their oaths of office by refusing to serve.
Trump will remember this going into 2024 if he wins. If he wins in 2024 and he ends up being president for his last term, which will be the last term in his view of any president ever, he will remember this lesson. He will remember that even if it gets all the way to this point and he is red-handed caught, nothing will happen. There are no consequences for a presidential figure attempting to overturn our democracy and pull off a coup. There are no consequences for it. You're just allowed to do that.
Certified Joe Biden's victory. These efforts included Trump's so-called perfect call, where he pressured Brad Raffensperger to find him just enough votes to win.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
The judge concluded that the, quote, lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is, in the undersigned's opinion, fatal. So what does that mean? Well, Trump now faces 10 felony counts in Georgia instead of...
Basically, they caught Trump on wiretap saying he wants to find more votes so he'll win the state.
13 for now. This is certainly not the end of the Georgia prosecution, as some have reported. And Judge McAfee's ruling left open the possibility that the state can seek a fresh indictment on those charges if they include the right language. So what does this mean for the case against Trump, and what happened legally? Well, defendants filed a motion to quash the indictment by way of a special demur. In Georgia, the special demur is a request for a more definitive statement or an explanation of the charges. Quote, a special demur challenges the form of the indictment by claiming that the defendant is entitled to additional information or specificity. It asks the prosecutor to particularize the conduct that an alleged crime crime was committed. And generally, a demur and a motion to dismiss are essentially the same thing. They look only to the allegations and assume them to be true. They're testing the legal sufficiency of the indictment. They're not testing the sufficiency of the evidence that has been presented. In fact, trial hasn't happened, so there hasn't been any evidence really presented to the finder of fact. So why did the defendant say that the indictments were defective? Other than, claiming that the phone call was perfect. That doesn't work. That's actually a factual claim, not a legal claim. And I'm sure Trump will be allowed to make that legal defense at trial. But this special demur was testing the legal sufficiency of the indictment as written on legal grounds, not dubious factual grounds.
People have been saying that...
So they went after it because the indictment itself is bad, according to the judge? This just feels like a judge sympathetic to Trump trying to use technicalities to get him off for as long as possible to try to make sure he can... Because if Trump wins, the day one move is he becomes completely immune. Like, that is what happens. Day one, Trump is immune. The first thing they're doing is they're going with what's it called? Like the Patriot Project or something like that. I forget what they called that part of Project 2025, where they basically plan to make it so as that the sitting president cannot be criminally charged even for anything they do that breaks the law unless they are impeached by the House and the Senate. Obviously, like with the, 2/3 majority first, something that like never happens. So pretty much making the president that is currently sitting immune to any legal consequence for crime, which is literally what Trump's running on doing, because his goal is to immediately do Jan 6th, but while he is in office on day one. Like, to start that whole process from the get-go instead of waiting till he's lost the election to start it.
It was the highest vote ever. There was no way. A lot of the political people said that there's no way they beat me, and they beat me. They beat me.
They went after it because part of it was written poorly for a line, at least. I mean, that makes sense then. I'm just curious to find out, is this a Trump liking judge? Or is this like a genuine case of the indictment is just bad and they need to revise? If it's just the indictment is bad and they need to revise and Trump is just talking it up like he's had the charges dropped, then that's a completely different story.
And Paul, as you know, every single state, we won every state house in the country.
And here they argue that the indictments did not give the defendants enough information about how they solicited Georgia officials to violate their oaths of office. They raised two key issues. And the first issue was whether the indictment should have specified which parts of the oaths the state officials would have violated if they had gone along with the defendant's scheme to give the state's electors to Trump. The second issue was whether the indictments were specific enough about the parts of the U.S. and Georgia constitutions the defendants allegedly violated. Again, this is wonky, in-the-weeds procedural stuff that generally you don't see in really famous cases, but this is sort of the blocking and
legitimately, yeah, no, it's literally just that Trump took a basic revision and said, oh, they dropped the charges. It's just Trump bluffing. He pulled an Andrew Tate. He literally pulled an Andrew Tate, where Andrew Tate, once he was let out of jail because there's a limit to how long you can be held in Romania, regardless of how guilty you are, he claimed, oh, I've been let out, while wearing his ankle monitor. He's like, oh, I've been dropped of the charges. They let me out because I'm an innocent man. And now all of his fans think that he's off the hook, but like, currently Andrew Tate is in deeper shit than any sex trafficker has ever been in the history of sex trafficking. So many of his victims are minors, or were minors when he either A, sexually assaulted or raped them, or sex trafficked them, or both. He is so fucked. He is so fucked. He has so many charges against minors that are now on his sheet. He is so fucked, Andrew Tate is. And he's just told his fans he's off the hook. Trump basically tried to pull Andrew Tate's strategy.
Tackling of being a trial lawyer is arguing these really minute issues of detail. And on the first issue, quote, defendants first argue that the indictment is defective because the charging language does not cite the oath each of these solicited public officials were required to take. In fact, the Georgia state officials don't all take the same oath. Georgia senators and representatives must take an oath prescribed by Georgia Code 28-1-4. The governor takes a different oath. The Secretary of State takes a different oath prescribed in a different section. And there are subtle differences between each one, and the indictment doesn't say which parts of these oaths the various defendants violated. Now, Judge McAfee ruled that, quote,
That's
this omission
fucking
is legally
wild.
harmless because, quote, precedent is clear that the allegations must either include every essential element of the predicate offense or charge the predicate offense in a separate count. And in this case, all three statutory oaths contain some linguistic variation, a provision that the oath taker will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Georgia. So the indictments didn't need to go into specifics about which parts of their oaths the officials would have violated. However, the defendants were correct about the second issue, whether the indictments weren't specific enough about which parts of the state and federal constitutions were allegedly violated. Now, if you've ever had a perfect call that
Okay.
has led to a witch hunt...
So the indictment was just bad. Like, it was just a badly put together indictment that would not have been strong enough to get Trump. And so this guy stopped it in its tracks and said, revise. Something that apparently is totally normal, but Donald Trump needing to have something to tell his audience is that is a win. Because remember, fundamentally, many Trump supporters think Trump is a winner and that supporting Trump makes them a winner. Right? And so from their perspective, it's all about thinking Trump is winning even when he's losing. Even when he's a victim, he's still a winner.
In multiple states, you're going to want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my firm, the Eagle Team, can help. If you've had an injury or death in the family...
I mean, I honestly might employ them one day if some psycho goes after me or something. I had a case where someone tried to sue me one time, and it didn't work out very well for them because they didn't show up. But, like, they still threatened to sue me because, like, I talked about allegations against them in a YouTube video. Like, I feel like lately, people are getting way more into suing YouTubers for talking about them. Like, everybody's realizing, wait, you can sue people for anything. And because, like, talking about someone after they've, like, sued you is generally not a good idea. Like, you have to, like, stop talking about them generally to, like, help your chances of winning no matter how bullshit the case is. It's a basically, like, easy way of making it so someone can't talk about you. Realistically. And so like I've seen it's happening more than ever lately. Like Oz Media, I believe, has gotten, obviously, like, everybody that was associated with and was, like, attacked by and targeted by Illuminati got sued by her. But, like, that's a YouTuber suing other YouTubers. But, like, there's been so many other cases where it's like random weirdo attempts to sue YouTuber. It's happened to me. It's fucking crazy.
Count one is for the Georgia RICO statute. That indictment says that the defendants committed 161 overt acts in furtherance of their corrupt RICO scheme, and the entire case is anchored by the RICO charge. That charge remains intact. And then count two says that Trump...
Yeah, the judge even gave them 30 days to revise. Exactly, yeah.
Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Janet Ellis, and Ray Smith unlawfully solicited, requested, and importuned certain public officers to engage in conduct constituting the felony offense by unlawfully appointing presidential electors from the state of Georgia in willful and intentional violation of the terms of said persons prescribed by law. And then Act 3 of Count 1 says that, quote, members of the enterprise, including several of the defendants, made false statements in Fulton.
God, look at Giuliani's teeth, bro. Bro, look at those chompers, man. Look at those chompers. Why does he look like a cartoon mole?
Members of the enterprise, including several of the defendants, made false statements in Fulton County and elsewhere in the state of Georgia to Georgia officials, including the governor, the secretary of state, and the speaker of the House of Representatives. Members of the enterprise also corruptly solicited Georgia officials, including secretary of state and the speaker of the House of Representatives, to violate their oaths to the Georgia Constitution and to the United States Constitution by unlawfully changing the outcome of the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia in favor of Donald Trump. So one of the acts charged by Count 1 involved convincing the members of the Georgia Senate Judiciary Subcommittee to act on Trump's behalf by submitting a different set of electors to the Electoral College. That's the event referenced by Count 2. And Judge McAfee explains the way the indictment is designed. Quote, the indictment, when detailing the manner and means of the criminal enterprise alleged in Count 1, describes the defendants as soliciting Georgia officials to, quote, violate their oaths to the Georgia Constitution and the United States.
So yeah, literally the indictment's just badly written. It needs to go about explaining why what Trump did was unconstitutional, illegal, and anti-democracy itself. Also, look, guys, look. Legal Eagle is plagiarizing from Illuminati again. I literally didn't even make the mental connection whenever I mentioned Illuminati earlier, but that all started with Illuminati accusing Legal Eagle's editors of plagiarizing her for using this edit, if I recall correctly. Or not even using this edit, but asking her editors how to make it easier to use this edit, because apparently there's a way to, like, automate, like, selecting all the settings and all of, like, the options to make the edit look like this. and then you just apply it to the timeline and like pick the spots you want the edit to happen on. So apparently there's like an easy way to automate it that Blair's editors know, and Legal Eagle's editors messaged Blair's editors politely asking, hey, would you be willing to share that method? It's a very simple edit that many people use. I was wondering if you knew how to make it a little easier, make things easier. And Blair's response is to say, using this edit is plagiarism. And that's what started everything. That's where it all started.
Constitution. Thus, reading the indictment as a whole, which the trial court is required to do, confirms that these are the prescribed terms at issue in the 6 challenged counts. That event, the subcommittee meeting, is charged as a separate crime in count 2, but the judge says that the indictment language of count 1, whether it says to violate their oaths to the Georgia Constitution or to the United States Constitution, is simply too generic. Quote, while the averments do contain a reference to the terms of the violated oaths, this court finds that the incorporation of the United States and Georgia Constitution is so generic as to compel this court to grant the special demur. On its own, the United States Constitution contains hundreds of clauses, any one of which can be the subject of a lifetime study. Academics and litigators devote their entire careers to the specialization of a single amendment. To further complicate the matter, the Georgia Constitution is not a mere shadow of its federal counterpart. And although some provisions feature similar language, the Georgia Constitution has been interpreted to contain dramatically different meanings. This is in marked contrast with, say, aggravated assault with a handgun, which can be perpetrated, quote, in only a limited number of ways, and an indictment that merely refers to a handgun is not too vague because it infers that the weapon was used either as a firearm or as a bludgeon. So the language about the Constitution just says that the defendants violated their constitutional duties, but doesn't say which ones. So the provision should have named which parts of the Georgia Constitution the state officials would have violated if they went along with Trump's plan. For example, Article 1 says no person can be deprived of property without due process. Article 2 says no person can be denied equal protection of the laws. So if the indictment alleged that the state officials violated their oaths of office, thereby denying someone the right to have their vote counted, that might have passed muster with Judge McAfee. And you might think that Trump and the other defendants should be found guilty of every...
Do you guys think that this is a case of, like, bureaucracy just not being able to, like, withstand fascism? That at the end of the day, when there's, like, so many pencil pushers and, like, little clauses and, like, you know, what ifs and but ands, like, hidden and written into all these laws and legal processes, that, like, a fascist can so easily just break the law blatantly so and very clearly be entirely devoted to being against the spirit of the law in every act that they commit, and yet still get away with it because there's a million different technicalities they can get off on. And it's like so obvious they're getting away with breaking the law that they get a nickname like Teflon Don because nothing sticks to him. Like, do you think maybe this is proof that, like, bureaucracy might not be able to withstand fascism? Like, that rigid bureaucracy is not actually that effective? Maybe? I don't know.
Every single charge. Or you might think that Trump and the other defendants should be acquitted of every single charge. But this is exactly the kind of careful analysis that you really want in a trial judge. Judges should sometimes be skeptical of prosecutor statements. At this point, let's put on a picture of Spencer. Yeah, you should definitely be skeptical of prosecutors' statements. Maybe especially as here, where an indictment is so voluminous and complex. But the judge here did not say that the defendant's conduct was incapable of satisfying the elements of the crime. Quote, the court's concern is less that the state has failed to allege sufficient conduct of the defendants. In fact, it has alleged in abundance. Yeah, that's the kind of language as a defense attorney you don't want to see written about your clients. But the judge goes on, quote, however, the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is, in the undersigned's opinion, fatal. As written, these 6 counts contain all the essential elements of the crimes, but fail to allege sufficient detail regarding the nature of their commission, i.e. the underlying felony solicited. And as former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti put it, quote, indictments need to be specific enough.
Like, it feels so fucked how our legal system is so built on these small technicalities and these weird little, like, loopholes where people who are very much not needing to be given a harsh punishment or even found guilty are constantly found guilty. There's countless people who have just barely avoided death row after, like, modern day DNA evidence proves them innocent or something like that, and they get a retrial. That's happened so many fucking times. There's so many cases where innocent people are charged, and yet, next thing you know, you've got so many people who are absolutely in need of going to prison who get away with it because of technicalities. Your Trumps and your O.J. Simpsons and what have you. Like, yes, loopholes and technicalities. Like, our criminal justice system is just not very good. It's not well designed. There are a lot of ways in which rich and powerful people can practically and literally get away with murder, and yet plenty of people who just got caught with weed in their pocket have their lives ruined. The recidivism rate of the US kind of proves my point for me. I don't even need to make much of an argument. Once you've gone to jail once, you're pretty much guaranteed to go again. Or I should say prison.
So the defendants know what crime has been alleged. But there's a big caveat here. Judge McAfee concluded the quote, however, these pleading deficiencies do not apply to the corresponding overt acts listed in count 1, specifically overt acts 23, 42, 55, 102, 112, and 156. Overt acts alleged as part of a conspiracy are not held to the same pleading standards as statutory-based offenses. Defendants have not provided any authority requiring that the particulars of an overt act be alleged or subjecting overt acts to the standards of general or special demurs. The defendant's challenge to these overt acts is therefore denied. So in practice, that means that the criminal counts that have been dismissed are gone, but the related overt acts survive. For example, Trump's call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger can still be used to prove the racketeering charges against all defendants. Mark Meadows is probably in the best position after this ruling, since the only count remaining against him.
It seems like the evidence and the core of the indictment is still going to be admissible. It's just they need to revise it because the indictment is pretty poorly put together. Why the fuck are the two people who put it together and made this whole thing elevate to this point in a relationship? They fell in love over the course of this whole thing and got into a relationship? What are they, a couple of fucking high schoolers working on a school project? This isn't a fucking game. I'm sorry, but when I heard that, I wanted to say this before, but what are they, fucking high schoolers that fell in love while working on a fucking school project because they got partnered up together? This isn't a fucking game. This isn't low stakes fucking school shit. We're talking about somebody who is actively running for president, who, while president, did a massive amount of damage to our country and is actively running on the policy of doing what he did that you are currently indicting him for way harder and more successfully if he gets reelected. This is not a fucking game. You gotta take that shit seriously. Corruption's a problem too, Zan. Let's not forget. Yep, bureaucracy is rife for corruption.
Is related to that call, but he's still being prosecuted as a RICO conspiracy defendant. Now, that doesn't mean that the district attorney is out of options. The DA's office can theoretically re-indict quickly. If there's a grand jury on the premises, it could happen almost immediately. But that process is a little cumbersome compared to what happens in federal court, where the prosecutor can just file a bill of particulars to inform the defendant of the charges in sufficient detail to minimize the surprise at trial. But Georgia law doesn't have such a provision. Or the state can appeal. The judge notes that alternatively, the state may request a certificate of immediate review pursuant to Georgia code, which the court would likely grant due to the lack of presidential authority. But that would obviously pause the case while the appeal is litigated. Or the DA might simply choose door number 3, letting the ruling stand without filing a superseding indictment. The same conduct is covered in the RICO count, because theoretically the DA only gets one more shot to properly indict the conduct, because if the state loses a second special demur, then the state isn't allowed to replead after that. Now, if the thought of Trump getting off scot-free made you lose your appetite, I have good news, because you can get it back with today's sponsor, Factor. Because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And the meals are completely ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You can eliminate the hours it would take to shop meal.
I like how we go straight from the legal document to jump scare meal prep subscription. I will say that does look quite good. That does actually look quite good, and if I was getting that delivered to my door all the time, I'd be pretty happy. But frankly, my favorite prepared meals like this that are 4 minutes in the microwave and they're ready and they're fucking amazing. Literally one of my favorite, if not my favorite food. I can just get them delivered from Walmart. It's so top tier. But I guess that's the long and short of it, huh? I guess the indictment is just badly put together, and maybe the two people who did put it together are a couple of jackasses. That worries me in regards to the future of their going after Trump. It doesn't really seem like they've got their shit together when they've made such obvious and clear mistakes. That should not be happening when the case is this serious. Can we get new people in charge of this, please? No. Regardless, I mean, it just seems like this is pretty normal, and Trump kind of blew it out of proportion just to kind of give his fans that impression that he's winning, and because they support him, they're winners too. It's always been Trump's slogan. It's always been Trump's brand.